July 22nd. Is it okay to, do I need to do it again?
No,
Okay.
I think we're good, Mayor.
Okay, great. And present are Bennett and Hoy, and we'll be operating as a subcommittee and try to move some of this stuff along if we need to. Okay. And so our first item is preparing for the 2023 legislative priorities. Courtney, are you going to lead us through this, or do you want us to just take each of these up, or what would you like to do with this?
I'd be happy to. And these are just the topics that we've discussed at your last meeting. And so I am currently preparing a one-pager. One hopes it turns out to be one page in its entirety regarding the River Road Slide Mitigation Project, which is about 20 million. At some point during the conversation, and I can't recall precisely which conversation, I was asked to produce more data about the impact of the road closure. And so we have current traffic counts that I can add now to this, in addition to describing the overarching problem with that road being out of commission and the safety concerns of how it goes out of commission, accidentally dropping a rock on one of our community members or something. But for certain, we can say that it's about 6,000 cars that go further west each day from Minto Island Park. And so the regional nature of the road is really much more easy to describe with some of the data that we have available. So I'll be putting that together.
Will we have participation in this from Marion, Polk, and state, Marion, Polk counties in the state? How will that be in terms of moving it along or getting it moved along? Do we know?
That's my hope, Mr. Mayor. Courtney, if I can, Mr. Mayor, Mayor-elect. Part of me asking for those numbers and that data is how do we bring more people in within the region that understand this and then give us a little more of a political voice within the process. So we can certainly discuss that with our partners. We can discuss that with our partners at the COG. And bring some of those other electeds in so they realize that, you know, the importance and how vital that corridor is. And
I don't know how you move it along without that.
No, we thought that would be strategic to you know, discuss that and start building coalition partners prior to the 23 session.
Okay. Would that come in then as a committee bill, or how are you thinking about it?
So I asked that again, Mr. Mayor, in my conversations. I've had some really good conversations with both co-chairs. Went up to Portland last week, met with Elizabeth Steiner Hayward, who could be a co-chair, could have the potential to be Senate president. And then also met with Tana Sanchez from the House side earlier and just didn't talk specifics about a lot of this stuff, but talked about overall when we get into packages that are of a bigger number, how we want to approach that. And the early conversation, obviously in July, you know, pre-session is, let me think on that a little bit. How, whether it's a Christmas tree project, whether it fits specifically within a transportation package, et cetera. Let's find the fit. But the numbers, I mean, why I think it's a positive, the numbers weren't, oh my God, the numbers were, that's a really good project. We need to have those conversations. Obviously, we've got contested races in and around that area, which strategically, I think we could leverage a little bit of that with our members outside of our area, et cetera, on the politics side. But again, no blowback on that number's too big. Same with navigation center, same with sobering center, same with these things. It's like, hey, Justin, keep giving us these ideas so we can implement these programs so they actually work. What they don't want to see is one-time funding where things flame out. So I'm really encouraged. That's a long answer to your question. But I'm encouraged by that conversation. So we will play that out to see where we fit.
Okay, Chris.
Sorry, Mayor-elect.
No problem. Justin, I would also encourage you to consider it as like an emergency preparedness package. So through that other angle as well, I think that especially Rep. Evans, who covers that area and who is influential in the emergency preparedness community and committee, I think could be an ally there, and that might be a potential avenue as well.
Okay,
Yeah, great point. Thanks.
okay. Peace Plaza.
Sorry, Courtney.
No, it's all good. This is the purpose of our conversation. Thank you, Justin.
Do you
Thank
need
Mayor
anything
Bennett,
else
and
on
thank
that,
you.
Justin? Do you need anything else on that?
No, I think we're good. I mean, I think we're all working internally, right, to give ourselves the best data, the best information,
Right.
the best messaging that we can to go forward. And the nice part is we've got an election prior to this legislative session. I think we can utilize that in conversations with all candidates and all incumbents on how we move forward. So there's really some good opportunities here, and I'm glad we're starting this work 5-6 months ahead of time. As we all know, we've got deadlines when it comes to drafting. We've got strategic angles we need to take as to where these dollars may or may not come from. And we're having those early meetings. So I'm really encouraged right now. And I think the more work we do internally in terms of strategy and data and how we can present that, the better off we're going to be. So I'm encouraged.
Great. Okay, Peace Plaza.
And this again is a repeat from a ask in a previous session. We're looking at 2 million, and that again is to sort of reactivate that park. It's consistent with the project that you may have seen in the bond package. And so if it is successful funding through this other mechanism, we have some flexibility with the other priorities in the bond package.
Okay. And do we have, did you have a, okay, never mind on that then. Policy for affordable housing?
These next 4 3 are priorities for legislative fixes and ideas to push forward on the policy side rather than the funding side. These are things that would be the references that you see parenthetically are referencing bills that have been prepared in the past. So for the affordable housing fix, that's repurposing Senate Bill 1557 from 22 session. Sorry, Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Courtney. On that one, I, in my other capacity, have been having ongoing meetings with OHCS and other advocates, and also Senator Lawrence Spence, and also Rep Neron, because they have a similar property in their area. And so this is, I think, I'm not sure that we're going to need a standalone City of Salem policy issue on this, because I think that this thing is moving forward with its own momentum at this point. I don't think it'll be a legislative fix. I think it'll be something bigger than that.
Administrative, it'll occur internally.
Yeah, and more federal. It's really on a federal level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Hoy, who was the other name? Neron?
Neron. Mm-hmm. And Graber has some, it's right near both of their districts, but I think it's in Neron's district.
Okay.
Senator Akasha Lawrence Spence is taking a primary role on it as well. And Senator Patterson has been involved in these conversations also.
So this is something that we could take then off of the priority for policy fixes and instead just take action as being a signatory to testimony and support. Okay. Does that work, Mayor Bennett?
Yeah, I think it's just one you'll want to watch, and if it demands legislative action, it'll be something you'll see during session. So
excellent.
What it does is alert Justin that that's, I think, a high priority issue, to just make sure we don't miss an opportunity there.
And I'll certainly be having conversations with those electeds that Councillor Hoy mentioned. So that's great.
Okay. Photo radar.
This is a perennial request. Salem was left off of a bill for photo radar. And so Senate Bill 560 was referenced here from the 2019 session. And this would be another sort of repeat attempt to try to get that fixed.
What went wrong? What happened that we didn't, not originally, but in terms of getting put in? What's going on?
Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Well, I was going to say 2019. That's a lot of years ago. I'd have to go back through our report and refresh my memory. I try
So
to
the
forget.
last
the
time we
sessions
tried
once
was
they're in the past.
2019. Is that do I
What's that,
understand
Mayor?
that correctly?
Yes, the last time we tried was 2019.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good. I'll do a little research on that. We'll give it another go.
Yeah.
And I had conversations during the last session on this issue because there was a modification to the photo radar law, and I tried to do a little bit of negotiating to get our ethics in there for us, but it was short session, last minute, didn't happen, but there was a lot of appetite for fixing that. A lot of people aren't aware that it's only certain cities that can do it. So I think it's just a matter of educating a few folks. Unfortunately, the key players in those conversations aren't returning, so we might have to start over.
Okay. Sounds good.
Another idea.
Future recreational vehicle. This is just such a good one. That seems like such a good statewide.
Yes, this was an idea that we had been discussing and had forgotten that there was a bill in the 21 session. And so this is Senate Bill 4066 from 21 that we can re-energize a commitment to that issue, I think, with our recent experience. And we have a bunch of good information about the total cost that we experience on the end of the useful life of those vehicles. And so we have some good information to be sharing and to buttress the case.
Is there a recreational vehicle association? I assume there's one for everything. So do you know, Justin, if there's a lobby group or a trade group?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about RVs. I will look, I'll get my handy dandy Capital Club guide out here and check and ask around, but I'll definitely check that out.
It seems like that'd be one that would be really interesting to kind of see what's going on with them. It sounds like you've got two alternatives, point of sale or a licensing or both, and having that avail. But I would assume they'd become the alternative in this thing. They would be the other side of this issue. It just
I'll
sound
do
like something they're going to sign up for.
I'll do a little legwork on that. There are definitely some subcommittees looking at it.
Are there? Oh, great.
From the city side.
Another angle I think we should look at, Justin, in addition to what the mayor mentioned, is these derelict RVs that are being sold out of lots for $20. Just to get rid of them. We need to have, maybe if we had some sort of standard or that just didn't allow that, because we really need to cut off that supply that are coming out of these, where people are just trying to offload their headache and they're offloading them onto our street for 20,
Wow.
We just say, they're essentially saying, take this off my hands for $20 and, then it becomes our problem.
Right.
Do we have anyone doing that here in town, Chris?
Yes.
Do we?
Yes.
Is there anything we could do with a local ordinance that would?
I don't know. I don't know that.
We do
Well,
have
if-
you can't have a house on, a car on blocks. We do have some regulation in that general area. It might be interesting to see if we could at least make it go away here. I didn't realize people were selling them that way as a business. I could see how an individual
That's the
might
big
want
problem is that's what happens is they tow these things that are derelict and then they're just more derelict when they resell them. I mean, because they've just sat around even more neglected, and it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Hey, Courtney,
Okay.
do we have, just so I'm sure, I just looked up in my email here, Tom Holt is involved with this. Courtney, has anybody from his shop reached out to you at the city? I know he's reached out to me here, putting this abandoned RV work group report together. So I'll get that over to you to see if that's something you want me to sit through. Tom Holt, it threw me off. Tom Holt is traditionally medical.
Yeah.
When it comes to
Do we know who his client is in this thing?
yeah, I'm looking right here, Mr. Mayor. Tom, Oregon Tow Truck Association.
Oh, okay. I'll bet.
But you remember Tom? I mean, he's always just healthcare, right? So so that somehow that slipped by. But I do remember talking to him about a month ago, and then just got an email yesterday at 12:12 12:00 something to talk about this group. So it looks like I missed the first meeting, but I'll follow up with Tom, and that's the work group I was referring to. It looks like tow trucks are on it.
Not bad. Okay, updates and information, is that, I'm not sure who that, is that you, Courtney?
It's a collection of all of us, I think.
Okay,
And Justin, back to the RV, we have some, I think, pretty good information about the total cost of destruction, and I'm not surprised that that the tow truck associations are involved and engaged, because it's really challenging once they come into possession of one of those vehicles that might be sold really cheaply, not at all reflecting the total cost of destruction. So that makes sense.
Should I work with you then in terms of action item, Courtney? I'll just work with you on how we approach this group, or is there somebody else within staff that I should be working with?
I will get you to the right people. I think you could have like maybe 10 minutes and your mind would be blown.
Still throw me into that financial group.
No, these
again, boy.
We're all good. We'll take care of it.
Okay.
So we have a bunch of things that had been of interest when we last got together. Measure 110 was one of those things we're hearing. It's just a little bit slower in pace than we had anticipated.
what is it? What is it?
Measure 110 is about the funding for recovery services. I'm going to have Josh come to the next conversation. He's out this week, and give you more of input and information. He didn't have as much as he thought might be available when I was talking with him before he left. Councilor
It's the decriminalization of drugs. It's
okay.
measure the decriminalized drugs, and we just had an update on it at the Marion County Public Safety Coordinating Council last week or earlier this week. I can't remember. So I do have some information on that I could share with you.
Go ahead.
I mean, I can just forward it to you.
Oh, okay. Great.
By the 110 folks.
It's supposed to be a method for funding more recovery programs, and we're just not seeing it come out quite as quickly as the funding as had been originally anticipated.
Okay.
So we'll get more of an update shortly. The mobile crisis funding, I had been asked to do some inquiry with counties about what they might be doing with the funding. You remember there was House Bill 2417. Initially, we thought this was a great vehicle to get some resources for mobile crisis, and then learned that it was going to be directed towards counties. And so I had just a real short, casual conversation with Marion County and the Health and Human Services Group. And I understand that they are looking at piloting a couple of programs. One, still furthering the work with law enforcement, and then the other would be dispatching from the crisis center. And so I don't have any more than just that they're looking at those programs and have a pretty good sense of what it would take to deliver it, but I don't have a sense of when those would be on the street.
So we got an update on that yesterday at the meeting with commissioners. And that sounds like they're moving the PCC, the Psychiatric Crisis Center. They're getting ready to move that over onto Commercial Street, 1234 Commercial. And in association with that, they're going to be launching, they just got a bunch of money to launch non-law enforcement mobile response, essentially. And they're getting ready to ramp that up. So I think we'll be seeing that sooner rather than later.
Okay. The bicycle pedestrian access over Highway 22 and the Cordon Road.
This is a project that what I understood from our last conversation is that it's been long standing, quite a lot of conversation about what this would look like. And I understand that Marion County is leading a design project and conversation about what this would look like for a bridge over, and the question about whether or how the vehicle access would include bicycle and pedestrian access. And so I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, it does. I think, though, we need to probably have have a more in-depth conversation with the county as to what they're actually doing and looking at and their level of information, particularly as it relates to state and federal highway folks, its relationship to the interchange down the way and at I-5. I think it may not, I don't know, what'd you get from that conversation, Chris? It's kind of not there. Yeah.
Well, they're
Yeah,
in design, and I think our role would really be to influence some kind of assurance that there is a bicycle and pedestrian portion to that work.
In our conversation yesterday, it sounded like this is a dead conversation that we need to reanimate if, and that the county was interested in helping us do that, but that it was our work to do.
Yeah.
Essentially is how I heard it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one I think that probably needs to be sort of revived in conjunction with the COG, with us, the county. And I think that missing still from this is some level of state and federal involvement, just to understand, are they gonna just step right in the middle of this and say, well, that's a nice idea? No, and we have a problem there. But my impression actually, Courtney, and correct me, Chris, if they understand the pedestrian bicycle portion of it. It's the whole it's the whole project, whether it could come off the ground at all at that site is really my impression. And that seems to have been historically the problem. I've been watching that one for years, watched Sam Brentano circle that for 10 years. And that's all he was able to do was circle it. And that the county couldn't seem to get that thing moving at all. So
that was my assessment yesterday as well. Yeah, same. And the concern, I guess, is that with having actual interchange there onto 22 is that Odot feels like Gaffin Road is the better place to do that down the way a little bit, which is not a great idea from our perspective at all. And then there's a whole problem with Gaffin Road with all the development going on there and the huge traffic impacts currently, let alone in the future.
So
well, and you've got increasing amount of development. You've got that Gaffin Road thing just gets worse and worse as time passes. There's a housing development that I know is heavily contemplated out there. They've been trying to get on to Cordon Road, and then you've got this school district, Amazon. I mean, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So it's going to be that's going to be a real difficult one, and probably we need to see what MWACT or what have they got on this. Have they done work on this? I know Sam was on that for years and pushing on it constantly. This one I think would take an awful lot of energy to get not very far. That's kind of my impression at this point. But
so is it your impression that Councillor Phillips is aware of these conversations that took place yesterday?
No,
not yet. I had a short conversation with him, but I'll be talking to him more in depth about it. He's certainly aware of the need, definitely, but I haven't updated him yet on yesterday's conversations.
He's also serving on SCATs.
right.
So that might be the nexus. He was, in my memory, he was the person who raised this question. And so he may be best positioned in terms of being at SCATs to help influence that conversation.
Yeah, and he may not have been briefed yet on this thing in terms of him. He's in a good position to get fully briefed on this by the COG staff, the transportation folks, to really understand what the problems look like there.
Okay. The next one, Mayor, you had mentioned something about a college baseball league, and I think Justin's had additional conversations to get more information. And so, Justin, would you mind sharing some of the background story?
Sure, thanks. I've met a couple times with Luke Emmanuel, who's trying to set this up. I think his approach is really good. It's a unique league, right? One like the Cape Cod League, where it's wood bats. It's kind of prospects that are looking to go from college into professional baseball, not just a kind of a ragtag league. those leagues are really good for feeding into that, especially with students, in their freshman, sophomore years, et cetera, in college. The hook, I think, that really works and why I think it would be advantageous for the city is getting the school districts and all the schools the ability to play on a turf baseball field early in the spring. As everybody knows, what happens is you get rainouts in the first half of the season, and then these poor students are playing 4 or 5 times a week to make up games in the late spring. And I think that that would be a benefit to the city. I think softball is also a part of that. So I think it really opens it up to a lot of students within the city. So my next meeting was pulling together Jim Green from School Boards Association to sit down and have that conversation, since there is that Salem Kaiser element there, and trying to get some more funding in, because seems like now that Willamette kind of gave it a green light or said, okay, we'd be okay with this, that it would make sense for the school district, for the city, for this league eventually. And I think I'm working on that second meeting with both those players. So pretty encouraging.
Well, having you and Green on this, you guys are both baseball players. I mean, this really, hopefully you're bringing all that expertise from your youth to bear on this thing.
Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago, but
yeah, well, Green was in the same, I think, similar, not certainly never reached your level, but he was at OSU.
So I met with Luke as well. I had a great conversation with him, and he updated me a few days ago. I had connected him with the Scan neighborhood, and he has met with them now. They've been very, very receptive and enthusiastically supportive of this. So they're really excited over at Scan. So that's a really, really good development as well.
And Willamette is real positive on use of their facility.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep, that's what he tells me.
So my understanding in talking with Luke, and I talked to him a number of weeks ago, so it's somewhat early in this process, but he was looking to us to help with finding the funding for the turf. I mean, that seemed to be the big, and maybe if there was a need for grandstands or anything like that, but it was mainly the turf, it struck me, was what he was looking for. Did I understand correctly what he was thinking of? And I assume some sort of parking resolution for that area. I mean, there's not a lot of parking in that for McCulloch Stadium or that general, or Bush Park in that broader area. Is that pretty much what he's after?
Yeah, I certainly put another hat on when we were talking in terms of funding and trying to get one of my other clients, obviously, to be a part of that. Which to me, it was turf. I didn't really talk about any of the kind of the public works aspect of parking or any of that other stuff.
Okay, I think that's one to at least kind of keep in the back of your mind. There is not a lot of parking facility. I mean, right now it's dirt parking on Mission. I can't remember what it's like on the back end of the park. There's nothing at LaFell, so it's that back end at Rural or Hoyt or wherever it is back there, and trying to figure out how to accommodate, because he was actually talking, if I understood him, he was talking about pretty substantial public participation as use of watching the games, and trying to figure out how to park those people might be tricky. So there's a couple of moving pieces there that need to be explored anyway. Good. Well, that sounds like one that's really moving along. That sounds really good. Moving tents and structures from dangerous roadways or environmentally sensitive areas. Who's against that one?
We'd been talking about whether this was something that the city would need to pursue on its own, or whether we could get other partners legislatively for some kind of a policy change. And I just wanted to ask Mark Weinstein to step in and talk a little bit about really sort of the possibility for us to change this locally and not need to expend political capital for an outcome. So Mark, would you mind just walking through sort of some of the analysis that legal's been at?
Of course. So in the 2021 legislative session, House Bill 3115 was passed, which was put out there as a codification of some case law. And that bill requires that the state and the subdivisions of the state, their ordinances that in any way, shape, or form regulate sleeping or keeping warm outdoors be reasonable from the perspective of somebody experiencing homelessness. Recently, the League of Cities also put out some guidance on this issue. There was a work group that had come together representing the various interests before that legislation was passed. I've had a chance to talk to some people that participated in that work group, go back and look at some of the underlying case law, Martin versus Boise and Grants Pass case. And we're all of an agreement that the time, place, and manner, it's a time, place, and manner restriction. And basically what it boils down to is that cities can regulate time, place, and manner as long as they're reasonable from the perspective of people experiencing homelessness. And especially in light of sheltering opportunities, but it doesn't force municipalities to have to allow people to, for lack of a better term, camp in areas that present dangerous situations to people who are camping, as well as people utilizing our roadways, especially if there are other accessible areas within the city where it is safer. I don't want to say safe, but safer to do so, spaces away from our roadways. So in talking with some people that were in the work group, there was also an expression of concern that if we were to go back, and the best vehicle if the city wanted to explore language that protected the desire to regulate, let's call them landscape strips. That's usually what is right next to our roadways. It's some type of landscape strip where people will put up a tent. That if we wanted language within some type of an amendment to House Bill 3115 that said something along the lines of, nothing in this shall be interpreted as preventing a municipality from regulating camping within a certain distance from the roadway, that the Oregon Law Center or groups on the other side would want to go in and put in things where it would establish what is unreasonable.
Right.
And so the better way to do this would be on a local level, which was what was designed in House Bill 3115, is that cities could regulate based on the needs of their own cities. So cities that have a lot of environmentally sensitive areas, riparian zones, things like that, like the city of Salem with the Willamette River going through it and other rivers, would have different needs than a city within Eastern Oregon. So I think we can achieve what the city wants to achieve here through local ordinances, as opposed to going in and trying to do a fix to House Bill 3115.
Is there, that really makes sense. I mean, we have a program underway. I'm not sure it can be enhanced by legislation or even ordinances. I mean, it just seems to be, it's working as well as it works right now, and that the real outcome is having a back end where people can go, and that we put as much work and effort into that. But that's future decisions. But the question I've got is whether we will ever have, as my understanding is, Portland has some sort of relationship with the Odot that allows them to do some regulation along some of the state roadways that come through the city to kind of at least sort of keep them under control. Do we And we are not included in that, or we do not have that kind of relationship with the state. Is that part of what this is about? Or am I just completely misunderstanding what this is?
Mayor Bennett, I know that there has been some discussions outside of this legislative committee, or actually it was a discussion within it as well. There are some intergovernmental agreements between Portland and Odot. And I think it relates to some legislation that's out there and the ability to enter into these intergovernmental agreements with a population of a city. I want to say it's 500,000.
Yeah, I think that rings a bell now.
And there was a discussion as to whether or not we wanted to seek to change that so that Salem would come within the fold. And the discussions that were had in the past were, there was a concern of how we could come to a population that would allow Salem to be in it, but not loop in Eugene. I think Eugene might be in a different region than Salem. And then ultimately it was, I think Mark Bechtel was part of the discussion as well. And it was decided that actually the relationship between Salem and Odot is fairly responsive on issues of cleanup. And we didn't want to broach this issue because there was no way to look at Salem alone without bringing in some other similarly sized cities where there isn't that same dynamic. So it does get into the layers. To the extent that it's Odot property versus Salem property, that may be one thing. But if the concern is overall public safety and the city's ability to regulate where people who are in an unsheltered situation can keep warm and dry and sit and lay outdoors, I don't think that what was passed by House Bill 3115 would prevent that, to the extent that it's our city and we have the property and we have the authority to regulate it.
The other question I guess I'd have on this too is whether or not, as a city, we have the capacity to take on any more sort of statutory or regulatory responsibility for additional property. We're having enough trouble working on our own streets, in our own parks. I mean, we're still chasing around Clyde Creek and over on the west side out at Cascade Gateway. I mean, it just seems like you could take on more property than you could ever hope to regulate. You just add to your problem. And we still, and like you say, we have a relationship with ODOT that seems to, work. And particularly using the model with that Gretchen is managing. I don't know, Chris, what do you think? I mean,
Yeah, I think this was a problem in the past that the staff has really worked through with ODOT, and I think we're in a good path right now. And I don't think there's anything to be done at this time, personally.
That we don't need to really add to our burden or their burden to.
No, we already have. Staff has already worked through that, we're on a schedule with ODOT. They're in good communication. I feel like, we can move on to something else. This is not an issue at this point.
Yeah, I think the one that was interesting is the state, and I'm not sure where we are on it. Was it your bill, Chris, that the state was to give us or to make a property available, unused property available for housing? How's that?
And we've been working on that. We've met with DAS and Gretchen, and that process is moving forward.
Good. That seems like a better, almost a more productive avenue, is that kind of relationship with the state breaking through on that one. Okay. Let's see, Sobering Center and Navigation Center.
So there is some conversation about whether to pursue additional funding support for the Navigation Center just yet. You remember that the city was fortunate to get some of those resources from the legislature with a couple of other cities of similar size-ish. And everyone's sort of at varying stages among those cities receiving the funds. Everyone's sort of at varying stages of opening a center, designing, construction, and opening. And so it may be better to pause on that and consider how collectively those cities report back and on progress as part of a request for additional funding resources. So those conversations with those other larger cities are ongoing among staff about what that kind of an ask would look like for the coming session, if there is one at all. And so those conversations are ongoing. And right now it just doesn't feel quite right, ready to me. And so I was going to ask whether we could look to a funding request for the NAV Center at a future date, a future session, maybe not right now.
What's the funding horizon look like on the navigation center? How many sessions do you have before?
Well, we have 2 years of operations right now.
Okay.
And we have the other necessary funding to launch the site. And I don't have enough specific information about where everybody else is in terms of implementation. I think we might be ahead of the middle of the pack. And so if we're going to stay in that pack, which helps in some ways with the funding request, it might be better to wait a session, 2 sessions, and go again collectively, being able to demonstrate some kind of progress before asking for additional resources.
The only concern I just suggest is you have very limited opportunities. You got once a year. You might be able to get some at one of the short sessions, but it seems like, given that you've got a session coming up, you don't want to miss the opportunity, if nothing else, to educate these people as to how we're doing, what we need, that we've only got 2 years left. If you miss the opening, you'd suddenly be falling back on the general fund or some other kind of grant funding that may not be as available. I don't know. It's just a thought on that, not to miss any opportunity at all that you have to go ask for money.
And Justin, I see you want to jump in. I would just add that it's sort of a strategy question about whether it makes sense to stay in the larger group and demonstrate the broader need that most of the communities are experiencing, and push for additional funding. We were successful last short session to get 2 million for sheltering purposes. And so this sort of newly formed mid-sized cities group might be our best way to demonstrate broader need, or we could consider going alone and making a separate ask. That's sort of where.
Yeah.
I think it's twofold, Courtney. So I think we stay a part of that group, have that, ring that bell through them, but we're also running our parallel track of us on our own. And the sense I got from Co-Chair Steiner Hayward was understanding, 23 might not be to come in and get the dough you need for the next 10 years, but it might be a bridge like you're talking about, Mr. Mayor. And what I thought, and again, I'll be talking to her more, but I got a sense from her, she wants to know what that funding looks like and how we implement it in 25 and 27. So I don't know how far we forecast as a government, but if we can show what these funds do now, what they're going to do between 23 and 25, what our plans are in 25 and then 27, I think that lays out a blueprint and starts to give them an ability to formulate in their mind how they're going to release these funds over the next 3 legislative sessions.
And that's easy, really easy to do, Justin. And we have a pretty good schedule of spending. And I would tell you, there is no plan for 27.
Well, however far out we can project it, I just think it's
no,
good.
But that's the point. There is no plan beyond the end of 24. And that's where the emergency starts. So I think, Mayor, to your point, we can articulate that we're okay today, and show clearly when these one-time resources drop off and what that means in our community to our unsheltered population.
And just
Justin, when she says there's,
go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Justin, when Courtney says there's no plan, what she means is there's no money.
Right.
There's no plan because there's no money at that point. That's
Yeah.
where we're out of money. And so that's the issue. So we have it forecasted out until it's done. And that's in 24, I think. And then that's when our need picks up again. So that's for Steiner Hayward. What she needs to hear from us is, no, we need ongoing support starting in 24 moving forward. That's
And now's the
issue.
time to ask for that predictable
Yeah.
support so that you can say, look, our plan can go beyond and it carries through, I think, real successfully. And if you're taught, and I don't disagree with working with other people, I always think that's nice, but I think we have what is a reasonably mature plan in that we have a building, we have some partners locally, we have some other things going on that would allow us to provide that kind of ongoing resource description and need, and also to provide Steiner Hayward and others with a model that they can point to with other cities, that here's a model that does work, albeit dependent on state funding, which may well be what the model's all about. That may be the ultimate story for the state is local government cannot fund alone, or may not be able to fund at all this level of institutional response to homelessness. And that's an argument we're going to have to make at some point, I think. So I think you just make it all the time, I take this from doing nothing but money on education over the years, and it's never enough. It's never an end. It's a never ending need. And you don't ever let up on these electeds as they are forced to face the responsibility they've got. You just can't let up on them. And that can sometimes happen as people try to agree on, how many of this type of employee can you have? What does the model have to look like? We've got a great model we're working through. It's great in that it exists compared to other places. And you can almost look at what's happened with Eugene's cahoots. It's an interesting model for Eugene, but it has become, because it's the only one in place that people have recognized at the broadest sense. It's like everybody saying, well, you need a cahoots. Well, I'm not sure that's correct, but it's the one that's out there that you can actually see. So I think we're in that position with this navigation center. I think it's really I think it's a real opportunity for us. So good luck.
Excellent. Thank you all for that conversation. And we can certainly, I think what we provided in last session it really sort of tells that story, and we can revise, modify, and better reflect the larger concern of all of these services that we're standing up with one-time resources.
Yeah, well, and I think having an opportunity to push it out in time, I mean, that you can take this and push it out into the future and say, here's what it's going to look like, and what the resource need's going to be. But then that leaves funding in lieu of taxes, property taxes. What do you want to do?
Well, this is, I think, Representative Hoy's bill from last session. And so the question is if we want to continue to pursue that into the next session, and who and where and how we might position that work.
I do have people ready to take that on if we're ready, in terms of sponsorship, if we're ready to do that.
What do you want to do?
Great. Just let me know who's going to take over the reins there. That'd be great. I'll start having those conversations.
Yeah. I don't want to announce their commitment right here, but I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. And I think we should be moving forward with that. They can either fix the tax system or they can fix it for Salem. I mean,
or
nothing.
Been down this road. I think it's great that you've got some folks lined up on this thing. The other one question I do have, based on what we saw the last time this was seriously discussed, was other cities quickly stepped in, whether it's Corvallis or Eugene or Bend or LeGrand, saying, hey, we got big institutions here too. Are you looking at it in that way, that it would be statewide?
Yep. Well, I've
Right.
certainly had those conversations, and every time I've had the conversation, everybody from, Pendleton, Monmouth,
Yeah.
everybody wants to jump on. And that could be ultimately what happens. But what I've tried to explain to them is, look, let us open the door, and
Yeah.
then you can walk through it later. But right now, we don't just have. It's not just about property value that we have here. We also have a real use, an extreme use of our emergency services, police,
Right.
fire, 911. That those other places don't all have. We have a significant property value in our city, 2.1 billion at last valuation, which is a long time ago. And but we also have the use of our services, which is where I think the real money is. And that's, when we talk, and every time we had a protest during our last session, I would say, that was on this, when the people driving around the streets, I would say, yeah, you're not paying for that. The city is. I would remind my colleagues every time.
Yeah.
And so I know that we've been down this road before, but I really feel like we're getting a lot closer.
Yeah. Okay, good. It's a steep hill. It is.
It
It's a
is.
tough issue. It is. Good
It
luck.
is. Thanks.
So, so thank you for the time and the conversation. Our next session is going to be September 23rd. And I think that at that point, what we really should bring forward are the more detailed funding pitches for your approval, and then forwarding to council for the River Road slide mitigation, for the Peace Plaza project, and then have the policy issue on the photo radar fix articulated again for you as a way to say yes or no to pursue that. And then it sounds like on the recreational vehicle work, I just need to get all of the data in one place and get you, Justin, in a room with the data to help push that conversation and story forward. And then we'll have an update on Measure 110 coming. I think, Councillor Hoy, you have access to an update on that. Mobile crisis, you have an update on that as well that we can share with the group. And then we will work internally with Public Works to reflect a better articulated position on the Cordon Road issue, and try to work with Councillor Phillips on that as well. And then we will continue to pursue the overarching funding request and that story around the services that we've stood up with limited one-time resources, and what happens to those when the funding disappears. So we can articulate that story more broadly. And so all that we'll have ready for the 23rd of September.
Do you have, that's great. Do you have, is there any thinking on other Christmas tree type fiscal dollar asks? I mean, do we have any other smaller projects that can be packaged up to give to legislators for the Christmas tree that we're not including? I mean, right now it's at 20 and 2. Do we have anything else that we need to get done? It's just not on the list yet.
That is a good question. And, one of the things that I appreciated about the exercise of building the bond package was really sort of taking that broader view of all of the things. And so we can certainly go back to that project list and what ended up kind of falling to the cutting room floor. That's a great source of ideas and projects for a Christmas tree. But specifically, I can also scan about different departments and see if there's something that we didn't even really consider for the bond that we might consider now.
Yeah, I think it's a good resource. I mean, you don't put them all up, but I mean, if you've got some, it gives Justin and the new mayor an opportunity to kind of look at some of the things that are out there that can go in and be pitched. Even at the last minute, you can walk in with those things in hand. And be prepared to take advantage of a situation. And that can be really, I think, fruitful for the city. I think it's been very helpful in the past. So particularly for these kind of isolated projects that kind of come along and need some quick funding.
Excellent. So we'll do that coordination work in the in-between times and come together in September with some ideas that we might pursue for a
Yeah,
future.
if you don't have them, then have them in the future, but have, sort of have your folks thinking that way, I think is really helpful for everybody.
Well, I'd like to have them for September. That would make it
Okay,
easier
sorry.
for all of us.
Good. If you have them, that's great. If you don't stop.
Excellent.
Okay.
So are there any other questions or conversation before we join back together in September with a package for your consideration?
That's it. Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much.